The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. So this is an election year. I don't think that comes as a surprise to anybody. One of the things that happens during election years, presidential election years, is the conventions, Democratic National Convention, Republican National Convention. These are essentially just cheerleading events. They're almost like sporting events. Everybody comes out and they build up to this incredible climax of the formal announcement of their party's candidate, Democrats and Republicans, each formally nominating the person that will represent them in November on the ballot. And these are typically very large in-person events done in large stadiums. Every hotel in the area is sold out. It's crazy. It's a mess. It's like political Woodstock, I guess you would call it. I don't know. But with coronavirus, there's a real question as to what should be done with the conventions and what would be safe to do. Democrats, although they haven't said anything official, Pat, Democrats increasingly seem to be leaning towards a virtual convention. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding so far. Probably will be a virtual convention.
Republicans, on the other hand, are not. And Donald Trump continues to say he wants the convention, which was scheduled to be in Charlotte, North Carolina, to be full, not with diminished capacity. And Donald Trump now is giving an ultimatum to North Carolina's Democratic governor saying, you have a week where you either will commit to hosting the Republican National Convention in its full form, or we may take the event elsewhere, which, of course, logistically is a nightmare. I mean, these conventions, the sites are determined years in advance. Planning starts years in advance. It would be a complete and total mess. The governor of North Carolina is insisting we're not going to sacrifice people's health and safety for politics. There are allegations that this is politically biased in the sense that North Carolina's governor is a Democrat, whereas Donald Trump is a Republican. And if this were Joe Biden who wanted a convention in North Carolina, they would be doing it. I don't buy it. But I think this is flatly about the safety, which Trump has not shown he cares about. He wants a huge rally.
Well, other states and other Republican governors are stepping up here, like Texas and Florida and Georgia have all offered to host the convention. So apparently they're not worried about sacrificing people's health and safety for politics. They're totally okay with that. Not surprising at all when you think about like Brian Kemp and Ron DeSantis, who have been total loons on the coronavirus this entire time. Yep. Kemp said in particular, we have world-class facilities, restaurants, hotels, and workforce. So that's great. I mean, as people go back to work reluctantly because they have to work in these restaurants and these hotels, they don't want to be doing it where people are, all over the place. They want to be working at places that maybe are at limited capacity. The last thing I think that they want to do this fall is to be working around people who are coming from all different parts of the country and putting themselves at risk. But these Republican governors are totally willing to put their citizens at risk like this.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if it's safe to do it, then do it. I have no interest in stopping it for political reasons. But if the virus is still circulating and people are flying it, first of all, can they get flights? Will flights be reinstated to a degree that all these people can get to where they need to go without making two stops, And I recognize that may be very urban centric. I know there are lots of parts of the country where no matter where you go, almost you have to make two stops. But I think people understand what I'm saying. But there is really no way to prevent the spread of the virus unless you test everyone upon arrival and then make them quarantine for a while before the convention starts. It will lead to viral spread if there is still virus circulating, and there's every indication there still will be.
And we know this, but they don't seem to care. They're putting politics first. Typically, after the Democrats hold a convention, the Democratic candidate will get a boost in the polls. Same thing when the Republican holds a convention, they'll get a boost. Usually it's just a few points, and it may be brief, but it's definitely a clear boost. And I think if the Democrats have a virtual convention and the Republicans have an actual in-person convention, there's a good reason. I mean, there's probably good evidence to suggest that the Republicans will get a better boost than the Democrats would, don't you think?
You mean by doing in-person versus virtual?
Yeah,
I
because
think
there's this party atmosphere.
Yeah, the atmosphere of the event is a big part of it all. It's not what Trump says during his nomination acceptance speech. It's all about the theatrics. And, this will be a perfect segue into our next story, because a lot of what Donald Trump is prioritizing right now is motivated by optics and sort of placating or appealing to specific voters. We reported last week or the week before that when you look at polling between Trump and Biden, one of the huge areas where Trump is getting increasingly crushed is among older voters. Now, whether it's related to the coronavirus, whether it's related to the economy, could be a variety of different things. But older voters have been moving pretty dramatically away from Trump and towards Joe Biden. And Donald Trump now has made it a priority. He says that for going forward, he is going to establish a system where Medicare plans will cap co-payments for insulin, the diabetes medication, at $35 a month starting next year. Now, a very cynical interpretation of this would be Trump announces it now. It doesn't start until next year. Maybe it doesn't ever really start if he can't get it done, but he uses it to get some of the vote from older Americans. I don't know that we even really need to have that debate to recognize why Trump is doing this. He's doing very poorly, increasingly poorly with older voters, and this is a direct appeal to them. It's, quote, a handout. It's not a handout I disagree with, but it is, in a sense, a version of that.
Isn't it sickening that he only seems to be doing this now or promising this now because he's at risk of losing elderly voters? Like, yes. Shouldn't he have done this all along? You can say the same thing about like Barack Obama and these former presidents who allowed drug prices and the cost of insulin to go through the roof without stepping in to stop it. But, you know, this has been a problem that's persisted for a long time. Trump could have done something like this 2 years ago, but there probably wasn't the political capital to do it. He would have had to stand up to big pharma, which he wouldn't want to do unless there was a clear advantage to it. I think this is the type of thing that could work. Like, it could maybe boost his poll numbers a little bit. Everyone knows that the cost of drugs in this country are outrageous. I would like to see maybe Biden come up with a proposal of his own saying that he would do essentially the same thing here.
Now, one of the things that's interesting about this, Seema Verma, some of you will know Seema Verma. She heads the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. She's kind of been sort of prominently early on in the coronavirus press briefings. She would sometimes speak and certainly be up on the stage with Trump. She admits that in order to do this, premiums have to go up $17 a month roughly for everybody. So if you are taking insulin, reducing the cost of insulin to $35 a month saves you a lot more than paying $17 more a month in total. If you are not taking insulin, you are just paying an extra $17 a month. And essentially what they're doing is they are socializing the costs of reducing the out-of-pocket on insulin. So once again, they are not really opposed to this type of stuff when they see a political benefit to it.
Yeah, what's the argument that they always make? That you can't just artificially come up with a cost of drugs because then the government will be the only payer. And then I don't even know what the logic goes, where it goes from there. But they always have this reasoning as to why we need different private insurance companies battling for what the cost of insulin would be. And it would just be totally outrageous for the government to step in and do anything about it. But I'm sure these right wingers will be silent when Trump comes up with the idea.
Yeah, and this is what we've been talking about for years. This is how you figure out what things cost. If all of a sudden the insurer picks up more of the cost of a medication, then those additional costs are divided amongst the total number of subscribers and everybody pays a little more. And in total, the amount of money going in and out is the same, but it's simply being reallocated. Instead of redistributing money, you're redistributing the expenses. And it's just math. It's just simple math. There's absolutely no way around that. More than 20 Republican members of Congress and constituents are suing Nancy Pelosi and other officials in court. Why? Because they don't want proxy voting, which would allow members of the House to vote from a location away from the House of Representatives. This is something that has never been established in the House of Representatives, that you can vote from some other location. Right now with coronavirus, there's desire in order to keep things moving, but without having members of Congress flying in and out of D.C. constantly, as they typically do every week or every other week. The idea is, hey, if you can't travel, if it's not safe to travel, you can vote remotely. Well, many Republicans don't want that. They are arguing that this is the type of change that sets a dangerous precedent, because if you do this, who knows what else you could justify, and that it dilutes the meaning of a lawmaker's vote. I don't tend to agree with that analysis, Pat.
Yeah, I think it's totally fine for Congress to do this right now. We're dealing with a pandemic. We don't want these people representing us, who are oftentimes elderly people, flying across the country for no reason. If it's just to cast a vote when they can do it remotely, if they can do it by proxy, you might as well just do that. I guess the counter argument would be that there are people all across the country who are working as essential workers, at medical facilities or grocery stores or whatever, and they have to go into work. So why not these rich people who are supposed to be working for us, who are paid by us? Why do lawmakers get this exception?
Yeah, and my answer to that would be, if you can be elsewhere and it's safer for the entire country for you to be elsewhere, then let's do it. And I totally get that there's a privilege. Listen, there's no doubt that the people who are more easily working from home are people in white collar jobs, people doing research, people doing information work. You can't work from home if you work at a grocery store, a manufacturer, et cetera. There's no question that there is a privilege divide. I don't doubt it. I've never denied it. I think that the way to deal with that is not to force more people to go into work which just spreads the virus. It's, well, maybe the essential workers who don't have a choice should be compensated in an additional way. Maybe there should be a supplement. That's the solution.
That's exactly right. And also, I think if these Congress people lived in D.C. full time, then it would be maybe justifiable to say, OK, you should go in and vote as long as you comply with the social distance guidelines. Go in and vote. It's the flying that's the problem. We don't want unnecessary travel right now. So that's why I am in favor of it. But I think they should also be able to record the votes. Like every representative should be on file as to what they voted for and what they didn't vote for. And that was maybe one of the problems with the CARES Act bill.
Yeah, I think the way it works is like if by voice vote it seems clear that it's a yes, they don't necessarily go and record every vote. Do I have that right?
Yeah, and they can do that for some pieces of legislation, but typically not like a big spending package like this. And for the first time, they were able to pass this spending package through a voice vote. So yeah, that was a little bit sketchy, but that's just how the rules are.
Hey, I do want to give people an update about the rabbit fiasco that's taking place. So I mentioned earlier this week that rabbits have gotten into my backyard and they had not yet found their way into my vegetable garden, but they left rabbit poop everywhere and it's a complete and total shit show. So a couple of different updates. One, today, 90% of the rabbit poop was gone. I can't.
Whoa.
So I'm not talking about there's 90% less new rabbit poop. Most of the piles are gone. It hasn't rained. It hasn't been particularly windy. It couldn't have broken down in 24 hours, right? Like I literally do not understand how 90% of it is gone.
Yeah, I don't think it would have dug into the soil at this time, right? It usually takes a little bit of time. Could something have eaten the rabbit poop? Because I know rabbits do like to eat the poop.
I have no idea.
I used to have one.
I have no idea. But so that's happening. But number two, yesterday, a rabbit got into my vegetable garden. I was walking outside. I startled it and it moved from being right outside. It just went right through my mesh netting into it. Then, as I went over to see what was going on, it panicked and it was just bouncing off the netting, trying to get out, and eventually pushed its way under. So literally right now, as we're working, I've got a handyman here, very trustworthy handyman, who is upgrading me from just this cheap nylon mesh netting to some actual 3-foot chicken wire that is metal. He's going to put it 2 inches into the ground so that they will not be able to get around it, and then kind of create a door for me to be able to get in. It's absolutely crazy. These rabbits are going absolutely bonkers out there.
Yeah, it was just a matter of time before one of the rabbits got into your vegetable garden.
Yeah.
Not surprising at all. And how funny is it that it seemed to know it was doing wrong, but couldn't get out so easily?
Yes.
So yeah, it looks like you're doing the right thing. Good investment. Did anyone have any feedback on my idea, which was to get a bird feeder that would attract squirrels, that would scare away the rabbits? I mean, it seems a little bit convoluted, but I think it would make sense.
People did write to me about it, and everybody said that you really don't want to attract more squirrels because the squirrels are usually better at climbing than rabbits. And even if I prevent the rabbits from getting in at ground level, the squirrels can hop up and get in way more ways than rabbits are able to, so that the last thing I want to do is attract more squirrels.
Okay, and we've conclusively determined that squirrels will target your vegetable garden?
They're
not just into nuts and nuts alone?
The people who wrote to me seem to think that the answer is yes.
Okay, that sounds right.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll maybe post a picture of my newly protected. I'm also considering getting a motion sensor for the vegetable garden. No, I'm kidding. But I will post a picture to my Instagram of the upgraded vegetable garden protection later today or tomorrow. That does it for today. We'll be back with a brand new program tomorrow afternoon.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.